Jon Shield, thank you very much for talking to RunUltra.
Thank you.
And congratulations on a fantastic win for the Beyond the Ultimate Arctic Ultra. Was it the Ice Ultra?
The Ice Ultra.
Yeah. Ice Ultra. So talk me through it. How did you come to do it? What made you choose to do it? And tell us about how many days and how you came to win it.
Yeah, well, I first came across Beyond the Ultimate and their race series probably about a year ago, and I'd earmarked to race even longer, their Desert Ultra. But obviously COVID hit, and then I had the option of deferring and waiting to do that later this year. And I sort of wanted something a little bit before that. And I saw that their Highland Ultra came up, which was something they'd made during COVID, so it was easier to at least get a race on. It's in Knoydart, beautiful part of the world, Scotland way. And it was a 3-day multi-stage, so a little bit shorter and just something that I could sort of get my teeth into quite quickly and minimal time away from work and so on. Went across there, and it was an amazing experience. The team, the same team wherever you go to race, generally the people there are the same, and they have the local people helping out, which is great for the ethos of what they're doing and so on. And yeah, I went there, and fortunately I won that as well, the Highland Ultra. And yeah, that was a brilliant scenic experience. And I came back and was like, what next? Knowing that I'd deferred the desert to go and race in the jungle, which is this June. So I knew I had that in the background anyway.
Okay.
And then Chris King, who is the owner and race director of Beyond the Ultimate, said to me, do you fancy doing the Ice Ultra? There's a place available. And knowing that he knew what I was like, he knew I'd say yes. And so, yeah, I sort of jumped at the chance and got on it. And yeah, all things worked out fairly well. And yeah, won it in the end. But it's the different environments that really appeal to me is, right, well, can you run in this environment and do well? But then can you go and run in this environment and do well? And it's that, well, can I run well in every single environment? I know for a fact I'll prepare really well beforehand and try and give it my best and give it my all. But obviously, sometimes you're always going to have issues that, whether it's an injury, whether it's the weather or conditions that play against you. And it's whether you can deal with those issues first of all. And yeah, what better thing to say than, well, I've raced in the Arctic and run to the Arctic Circle, and you know, just going and seeing these places, it's something that you probably wouldn't do unless a race. And you know, it's very fortunate to be able to go and do that, race in these places, and it's something that'll stick in my memory forever. And so yeah, it's great. But I'm back at the Highland Ultra again now in April, helping out marking the course as well. So
lovely.
It's really become something, and the team Beyond the Ultimate, the medics, the locals, it's something that it's
community
massively positive. Yeah.
Why multi-days?
To go to these sort of places, it's, you know, if you go for a day or just race a marathon, I think I'd feel a bit shortchanged. The longer stuff, I think it suits me better than shorter stuff. I'm not a 2:20 marathoner or better. You know, I'm probably never raced a marathon. I know roughly what sort of time I probably get, but I've always preferred the longer stuff. I was in the military. I used to do GB age group duathlons because I couldn't swim. But yeah, the longer stuff I always seem to get better as an event goes. So the first couple of days I kind of warm up into things and then progressively get better, fatigue less. And so they seem to just suit A, how I like training, and B, what I'm better at, to be honest. So I can keep a pace relatively longer period of time, and I just find them a lot more enjoyable as well.
Well, certainly, yes, that makes sense. If you're going around the world, it definitely makes sense. That I saw you won the Penlyn Winter and the Brennig Way. Is that I said that right? I mean, they're the other end of the extreme, really. They're the sort of shortest ultras you can do. It's a sprint.
Yeah, I think so. It's all relative, though. So particularly the Penlyn Ultra, that again is just a beautifully scenic area. And Hugh, who organises that, it's just such a fantastic area, the Penlyn Peninsula, that if I get any opportunity to race there, I'll go and race there. It was slightly shorter. He missold it me, though. It was actually 2 miles longer than what he said. So I don't think I'll ever thank him for that. But yeah, it was, I think, 37.5 miles, the Penlyn Winter Ultra. And it's one of these races, yes, it's shorter, but then my work rate was at a higher rate and pushed on. So time-wise and work effort, it felt just as hard as the Ice Ultra, really, because you're working with that higher percentage for, I think it took me 5 hours, 20 minutes in that region. And it was hard work the whole time. So in the Ice Ultra, it's relatively, my heart rate's lower. You can't move as fast because you've got snowshoes on, and underfoot was lots of soft snow. So it just everything takes a lot longer than what you would expect it to.
Do you wear snowshoes for the whole event, or is it only in certain sections you need to wear them?
Yes, I think this year was the worst it's ever been underfoot when BTU have had their Ice Ultra. So the first 15 kilometres, 12 kilometres was down an icy road, and then across the first ice lake, where they were the only parts where I didn't actually wear snowshoes for the whole event this year. After that, we were in snowshoes the whole time, and I think that was the same for everyone. Possibly the last stage, which was just a short sprint on the final day, could have got away without them then. But once you kind of commit to wearing the snowshoes, it's that hard to get them on and off that you can waste a lot of time and lose crucial time. So I think on the other stages, it was just a case of, actually, it's just easier to be in them, because if you took them off for a section where you thought, actually, it's going to be okay, you'd still end up losing time taking them off and then putting them back on. It was just easier to stay in them, and most of the time they were required anyway.
Can you actually run in snowshoes? Or, I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like.
Yeah, the ones that we were used and recommended to use were like a race snowshoe. Okay. Very, very light, and they weren't too difficult to run in, to be fair. I'd done a little test out on the grass where I live on a loop, and done about 2 kilometres in it prior to going out there, just on grass. So they felt relatively okay to run in. It's just a little bit strange, like having boats on your feet, but it wasn't difficult, to be honest. And sort of on the snow, you just needed them because there was no purchase on the ground, just with normal shoes.
Do they affect your gait? I mean, do you have to almost run with your legs further apart?
A little bit, but it's not too noticeable. I just think it's nothing you have to really focus on doing. You can pretty much run as you would run, but I think it does just naturally throw your gait out slightly. There was a couple of times where I'd sort of clipped them against each other, but not that I really noticed. So from that point of view, I don't think it was such a struggle getting used to it. The person who, my direct competition in the race most of the time was a ski mountaineer. So their background was very much living on steep slopes, snowy conditions. They came from that area. That's what they do day in, day out. And they were sponsored by Dynafit, which is a big ski mountaineering brand. So I think the crossover, probably when you're in that environment, a lot easier. but I didn't really feel like it was a massive detriment on particularly just putting the snowshoes on and going.
No, but what was the elevation like? And it wasn't that hilly, was it?
No, I just say it was more, probably I do most of my training runs have more elevation than each stage there. I think first two stages was about 3,500 feet of elevation each day. And the longer stage was about 1,500 feet of elevation. So by no means massive at all.
Okay.
All the elevation came on the first 2 days. The elevation was quite severe the way it came on, but with the ground conditions the way it was, usually you'd be able to run those mountains in, say, if it was without snow, in dry, rocky conditions like Snowdonia.
Right.
I'd have been able to king up it, race up it, no drama, but it was just a completely different ball game in snowshoes and the snow. And just even with the snowshoes, you weren't purchasing the ground very well, so you could get no real forward momentum, right. Which probably something I struggled on more that day. It's the only time I really lost ground to the person who came second was on the biggest climb of the whole course, and it was, I think, probably due to not being able to effectively put my feet down and get the engine going appropriately. But yeah, other things like drinking and eating to contend with, which at the start I found very difficult. Conditions were down to about minus 32, I think, on the mountain on the day, which very quickly, from starting off the very first stage, I realised actually, although I've got an insulated water bottle, they were freezing and I couldn't drink my water. And I think it caused a lot of people issues. And we had someone airlifted out on the first stage because of dehydration, which you don't think dehydration in the Arctic, no. But actually you've got your layers on and you're still working relatively hard. Checkpoints for about every 10 kilometers, but they can extend them every couple of kilometers, the local people, because they were doing it where it was safe to put a checkpoint.
Right.
And with conditions and the weather, it was difficult. But basically my water bottles would freeze, but it was the cap that was freezing predominantly. Right. So after the first two stages where I noticed my performance was being affected by not drinking, I was doing all my drinking at the checkpoints and taking the top off and drinking and so on, I realized that I had to use hot water in my water bottles. And if I had some nutrition, so I was using some Tailwind in the bottles, then that would help as well because it wouldn't freeze as easily.
Okay.
But I'd have to drink more often just to keep the cap from freezing, where any water left in the cap would freeze minus 30 pretty quickly. So what I was doing was actually drinking more frequently to keep the cap from freezing, but then blowing the water back through the bottle to try and remove fluid from the cap, the biting cap. So that seemed to work well once I'd figured that out, instead of just doing all my drinking at the checkpoints.
Gosh, that's a steep learning curve, isn't it? Did they tell you any of this stuff?
No, not really. We were told we needed insulated bottles, which obviously definitely was needed. But it's those tips, tricks, and so on that you only learn from doing these type of events and multi-stage events. But a couple of people came unstuck from it on the first couple of days particularly.
Everything must freeze, doesn't it? I mean, even did things like jellies or gels and food. I mean, doesn't it all freeze?
I tested actually in the freezer before I went. Different foods, so I knew what would freeze and what I could eat and so on. Just because we had inner gloves and I had mitts on as well, I opted against going for gels. I'd usually use gels in my races, but I just thought with the faff of trying to
tear them
open, it was something I decided against just for that race. So I used bars predominantly that I knew from testing the fridge weren't going to be rock hard, that I could still eat and take them on board. And I'd use the opportunity to do that generally at the checkpoint while the locals would fill or the medics would fill my water bottles up. I'd eat there and then, or take them out of the wrappers beforehand, just so I wasn't wasting my time really trying to take the gloves off. Opportunities getting cold. So I kind of got my little routine, but it was predominantly bars I was using, as well as sort of liquid nutrition. I was getting a steady stream of nutrition throughout to keep my energy levels topped up.
It's a lot to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something that you don't necessarily think about, and it's different to another race where actually I'm not going to have gloves on. Even your pack, using your pack, usually the compartments would be fine if you haven't got gloves on, but when you're trying to use the pack and undo pockets or reach into pockets, but you've got mitts on, because mitts are warmer than finger gloves, and you've got your inners underneath, and you think, well, actually, should I be taking my hands out of these on the mountain now because it's minus 30 odd, and actually, is it worth getting the hands cold to get nutrition, or do I just get it done at the checkpoint? And it was always that balance of trying to monitor what was correct, and I probably didn't necessarily get it right, but it was probably the best decision for me. On the long mountain, I wasn't eating and drinking. I waited to the checkpoints. People that did try and fuel themselves going up the mountain with the particularly nasty cold weather that was there came unstuck and became very cold. So although it probably wasn't ideal from a nutritional point of view on that first, second stage, it probably saved me in a way that, well, I wasn't exposed to the extremities by keeping moving. My work, it wasn't that high that I was burning that many calories that I needed constant supply of nutrition. So I think probably it was the right decision. But yeah, things learned. I always learn stuff from races and always keen to learn. So it's kind of an ever evolving process, I guess.
Yeah. So, gosh, yes. So what do you think you'll take forward to the Jungle Ultra, and what do you think you'll need to change? Apart from things like gloves, will your training be the same?
I think I'll keep most of my training the same. It worked pretty well. I've been doing my regular long mountain runs and some harder efforts on the mountains. I've been doing a track session as well. One thing I'll probably add more of are hill repeats, which I don't really do currently. Been doing quite high mileage, which in the lead up was good. Had to manage a few niggles just prior to going out, but I think for the time on feet and just the day-to-day, my legs actually felt fine during and after the race, muscle-wise. So I don't feel like they were overly fatigued. So that was a positive. So I'll definitely keep decent mileage in, a decent long day in. I'll probably try and aim for a couple of longer efforts than even what I was doing prior to that. I don't think I trained beyond sort of 5 odd hours on any of my long ones. So I might try and pop some longer ones in, maybe with a bit of a heavier weighted pack than what I did. I didn't do any real pack weighted runs prior to going out there. Pack weight was about 9 kilos at the start of the race, with water and all the food that we were carrying and medical kit. And so I didn't find the weight an issue. Sort of military background, I think parachute regiment, we always had big pack weights. We were always moving fast with that as well. And a lot of our training was moving with decent weight on our back, heavier than that. And during the mountain days anyway, I take quite a bit of kit, safety aspect, warm clothes, fluid. So, and a lot of that was harder ground, running the downslopes. So got a lot of load, joint loading and so on from that. So I didn't feel like I had to train with a pack, and I didn't, but maybe for more time on feet and moving, I'll add that in, but certainly going to keep the mountain running up more than anything, I think, and try and get some hard efforts with Russell Bentley and Geraint, who did quite a bit with beforehand, and that was good. But the track sessions for running economy and that extra gear as well, because if you're doing a lot of mountain or multi-stage events like the Ice Ultra as well, it kind of slows you down a bit as well, because you're not stretching out your legs, you're not working at the higher end of your heart rate. So I definitely think there's benefits to that as well. So I'll keep the strength and conditioning I was doing. But yeah, I think the main things are going to be more around the jungle starts at altitude. So I'll be looking at that and how I can train for that. I'll be looking at the heat and humidity aspect of things. And I know the terrain there is very lumpy as well. And it's a lot of going through bogs, river crossings and so on. So it's a case of
leeches,
trying to replicate that with your feet. Yeah. And so there's quite a few things to consider.
Where is it? Sorry, I don't know.
It's in Peru.
Okay.
So yeah, it'll be interesting. It's starts high on the elevation, and you go quite steeply down for the first stage. From what I've looked at, I need to look at it more, but certainly it's going to be a lot of loading on the quads. But
will your pack be lighter? Am I assuming that actually your mandatory kit is going to be very different to what it was in the
No, there's still going to be the same safety kit, but you've got to carry a hammock this time. So I'll still carry the same number of meals I was carrying, because it's over the same amount of time. It's going to be carrying a hammock, see all your medical kit, which will be the same. I think there's a few added extras such as anti-venom kit and possibly things like guards for your shins against snakes and so on. But yeah, I think generally the kit's going to be the same. So add a hammock on, it's probably going to be a little bit heavier, I would imagine.
Hammock, gosh. Yeah, hammock versus a sleeping bag and a bivy bag. I don't know. Was that...
Yeah, I think we were still... we didn't actually carry our sleeping bag during this race. We had a night bag on the Ice Ultra. So we carried our medical kit, we carried our clothing, we carried our meals, but they would keep additional warm kit. So we were allowed a spare pair of clothes and sort of warm shoes, as well as the sleeping bag, which I think just because the environment and the ability to dry clothes and things like that, it was kind of safety aspect as well as weight. But yeah, in the jungle, it's a case of it'll just be a hammock. There won't be a sleeping bag and so on, I don't think. So yeah, whole different proposition.
Yeah, definitely. Gosh. So the Highland Ultra was an inaugural event. The Ice, because there's five including the Highland Ultra, isn't there? I mean, are you going to do? Is there a grand slam by doing them all?
Yes, that's the main motivator. Actually, is to go and complete them all. So yeah, I've still got to jungle, desert, then the for rangers one, which is like a safari one.
Yes.
And then I know they're looking at a mountain one currently as well. So I've told them they've got to stop bringing races out before I can keep completing them. But yeah.
Well, it'll keep you going, won't it? Otherwise you'll get to the end and be like, well, what's next?
Yeah.
Have you thought of that already? What will you do when you've done it?
I haven't yet. I mean, I've got other races coming up that I'm going to fit in and around it. But yeah, I think they're the main focus, and because they're always far-flung places, it's nice. But certainly I've got some races around the UK planned. I've got Ultra Trail Snowdonia 50, race across Snowdonia, and
there's a lot of Wales in there.
Yeah, it's local to me, so baptism of fire, and it's a great place to train as well. But yeah, race across Snowdonia and UTS 50 in between. Well, I think they're after the jungle, so I've got about 3 weeks back, and then opted for the the 50 because there's the 100 and 165,
one.
which I won't be recovered for. And then the race across Snow is a 2-day multi-stage, and it's 40 miles a day and about 10,000 feet of elevation both days. So that's quite a stiff challenge 2 weeks after UTS 50. It's also one of Mike Jones's events, and he likes to create hard events. So I think that'll be that. And then also then leads up to the Dragon's Back at the September time. So hopefully
you're doing that.
Quite well into that, and the mountain days will increase in the lead up to that. That's why I've got those races in.
Okay.
But then I'll start getting out recceing the Dragon's Back routes.
And you've got Russell for that. And you've got a Russell time to aim for as well. Yeah,
I think so. I think there's just sort of the route and stuff, because obviously he was racing Simon in Dragon's Back last year. I think Simon's going to be back there defending his crown as well this year. I'm not sure what Russell's doing. If he's going to come back and do it again this year.
There's going to be 3 of you.
We'll see, hopefully. And it's nice to have the best competition out there, and Dragon's Back certainly brings in the best people. I know there's some really phenomenal guys turning up there. So to be able to race against them and assess where I'm at, obviously it's the first time I'm going to be doing it. So I don't have a clue with regards to routes. I'll try and recce it as best I can. But I think it's always hard going to somewhere you don't know. Our first 2 stages, I think I'll be fine on, because it's my local area. So getting those correct won't be an issue. I think it's as it progresses and goes on, and just the navigational aspect. But hopefully I can do a little bit of training and running through of the routes beforehand. One of my other friends is doing it. So it'll be interesting, but it's going to be savage.
It is. That kind of that's interesting that you're doing that, because a little bit like Russell, who was this guy who came out of nowhere last year and gave Simon such a run for his money. Who is Jon Shield, and where have you popped up from? You've popped out and you're winning everything. Where did it all start? Why did you start running ultras, and how come you're so good?
I think I'm just very determined and stubborn. I came out of the parachute regiment. I couldn't land jumping out of planes. I actually had a bad nighttime parachute jump. It broke my ankle, damaged my knee meniscus, and gave me a labral tear in my hip. So I ended up getting medically discharged. I had an operation on my hip, which was kind of like a hernia repair, but it wasn't for a hernia. It was for this labral tear. Didn't feel like it improved for a long time. So I didn't actually do any real running from leaving the military to actually a couple of years ago. And it always just didn't feel quite right. But I got to see a very good physio who I still go to now, and it just seemed to start improving. And it's not 100%, but it's definitely something now I can manage, and hopefully it keeps improving.
Why did you turn to ultras, having had this injury in the parachute regiment, and you've recovered from it, and you thought, okay, I'm going to go and run really long distances now over multiple days?
Yeah, I think it was just a case of when I was started back and I felt actually I can run here and it's not giving me any real issues. It just spurred me on. And I think at the time I was running backwards and forwards. I was working in Preston at the time, which was 86 miles each way commute, and I was doing 12-hour shifts. So on the days off, I'd try and run and make up for potentially the days that I couldn't train and run. So I just started increasing the distance and feeling okay. And the dogs always appreciate a long run as well. So it was a good way of exercising them. And I just really enjoyed it for mindset and endorphins and so on. I was just kept thinking I can keep going and explore some nice places around the area where I just moved to. And I was just then intrigued to see what I could do, and I started following people on the internet, on YouTube, and seeing what races were out there, and I was just being inspired by all these people. And I just then sort of laser focus on stuff, and I seem to be a bit OCD with things when I get a bee in my bonnet. And obviously I've just really enjoyed this and been taken by it. And I've met some amazing people during the time as well. Obviously we had COVID and so on, but with that sort of becoming less disruptive now, I've met so many people that now I keep in contact with and go out training with and so on. I've met a right good bunch of people, and it's nice to run with all these different people and track sessions, but then the long mountain runs with people and brecking routes. And it's just a great community of people, actually, and people want to help people, and it's nice to hear people's opinions on different events and kit choices and how they approach things as well. And there's no right or wrong way, but it's always nice to have different people's opinions and help.
Thank you so much. I think you've given us some fantastic tips as well on running multi-days. So good luck, both volunteering at the Highlands and also at the Jungle Ultra. We'll be following you for sure. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks very much.